Hello, everybody, and welcome. Really lovely to see you, and thank you for giving up this gorgeous sunny lunchtime to be with us. We're just admitting people in at the moment. So, yeah, welcome, says Ellie. If you would like to put your name and where you're from into the chat box, that would be really lovely, so we get an idea of who's with us today. And thrice welcome. It's 16 minutes past, and as you may or may not know, if you haven't joined a learning lunch before, these are very rapid, quick fire sessions. We're incredibly lucky today, really honoured to have Justin, Isabel, and Bill joining us today. You'll be able to read a little bit more about them on the Our Shared World Learning Lunch website, but we're looking at their report that's recently come out, Engaging the Next Generation, the State of Environmental Sustainability and Climate Change Education in UK Schools, and importantly, effective practice in the classroom. So Bill is Sustainability Education and Research Manager at Oxford University. Justin, Professor of Science and Environmental Education at UCL, and the President of NAEE, and Isabel is a postdoc researcher, lecturer and consultant. And they're here today to tell us a little bit more about this NAEE report. If you haven't been to a learning lunch, just a quick overview of what to expect. Our speakers will give us our first trio, will give us an overview and some input, and then suggest a provocation, and we'll pop you all into breakout rooms. We hope you get to introduce yourselves to each other and to talk about provocation, and then we'll come back in the room and have a little mop up. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to you, Justin.
Thank you, Kathy, and thank you for the invitation. Lovely to be here, lovely to see so many people. You might know that NAE was originally the UK National Association for Environmental Education, originally National Rural Studies Association. It changed its name, its emphasis in 1971. Since then, it's been working to support professional educators, teachers, those who work in environmental centres, etc. And we know that Ofsted, back in April 2021, started publishing a series of reviews of research, in education research, aimed at teachers, school leaders, and they published them so far in science, religious education, mathematics, languages, geography, music, history, PE, computing, English, art and design. And these reports have been very well taken, very well received. And some of them are slightly biased towards the Ofsted's view of what the findings should be, but nevertheless, the science one, for example, was downloaded at least 100,000 times. It was written by a colleague of mine, Jasper Green. So, of course, because environmental education, sustainability education is not a subject, Ofsted had no plans to produce a review, even though it would be extremely useful. So back in a year after they started producing those, in April in 2022, I decided to go to our exec and say we should produce something. We should put together a research review, and I know the people who can do it. And so that proposal was accepted, and so we asked Bill and Izzy if they would write this report for us. And so, without more ado, I'll hand over to them.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, so that was the beginning idea for the report. And so Bill and I went away and set out a plan for how we were going to go.
My computer died.
Evidence.
Well, no, Zoom died. It told me I needed to restart it.
Oh, and Meryl. Maybe I'll mute Meryl. Okay. All right. Sorry, Sarah and Meryl. We'll come back to you later. So yeah, Bill and I went away and we thought about how we were going to go about finding this evidence. And we knew we didn't have much time. But really it was a kind of rapid evidence gathering process, looking specifically into the academic literature, and really focusing on literature that had sort of rigorous evidence that could inform educators' practice in environmental education. So sort of searched high and low through all the journals, through any other kind of reviews we could find, to pull out some evidence. And I know I don't have that much time to go into this, so I'll try not to be too long-winded, but these were some of the key findings that we found. So, for example, the evidence was very clear that, you know, community and outdoor learning opportunities are really key, which I'm sure many of us know from our own experience, that can really sort of help to ground environmental education in the natural world and improve outcomes as well as students' mental and physical well-being. We also sort of uncovered the importance of engaging with international case studies and cultural perspectives and thinking about the interconnectedness of local lifestyles with ecological systems more globally. The importance of implementing cross-curricular integration of environmental topics was also very much foregrounded in the case studies and research we found. And it was also very clear that hands-on activities, real-world problem solving, and engagement with local sustainability issues, as well as sort of a deeper engagement with political participation, is also vital for effective environmental education. And as well as that, the sort of need to address the social dimensions of environmental challenges, and addressing issues of justice, equity, and power dynamics, was again very much sort of strongly coming through in the literature. We also found that there's a need to link environmental education with STEM subjects in sort of hands-on ways, and employing sustainable design principles can sort of increase exposure to green career pathways. And also, lastly, the need to cultivate partnerships with environmental charities, and other types of organisations beyond the school gates, to make sure that environmental education becomes sort of a more grounded in the local context entity. And we also found that whole school approaches can be particularly effective in this way. So yes, if you want to read more, we've got lots more detail and depth in the actual report itself. And we also have some specific case studies, one from Wales, one from Scotland, one from Northern Ireland, and one from England, that really helps to bring to life those points. And so we also tried to make sure that, as well as being focused on effective practice for teachers, we also made some recommendations for all of the groups who are involved in some way in environmental education. So for policymakers, we sort of requested that they develop comprehensive national strategies for environmental sustainability and climate education, as well as having clear targets, adequate funding, and making sure that all 4 nations of the UK are considered equally. We've also requested that there's a focus on cross-curricular integration and experiential learning, and more support for including environmental sustainability and climate education in the national curriculum. For senior leadership teams and governors and multi-academy trusts, we've requested that they prioritise teacher training and professional development. As we know, lots of teachers and educators don't feel well supported enough in this way, so we've requested more support for that. And we've also requested that those community partnerships, which we highlighted in the report, are given further emphasis. For teachers, we've suggested that it would be a good idea to engage in continuous professional development, which of course many educators do already, but it's nice to sort of highlight that it's key to stay informed. And we've also requested that technology and media could be utilised in perhaps more interactive and engaging ways. And there's some specific papers highlighted in the report that show different ways of doing that. For national local environmental organisations, we've said, fostering those partnerships across the board is really, really key. And we also wanted to make sure that we highlighted things that learners can do as well, because of course learners are a key group in all of this. And there's so much that learners can do in terms of seeking out diverse sources of information, participating in different types of activities, and connecting with peers, to sort of think of ways to address environmental challenges. And lastly, we wanted to highlight that researchers, of course, have a big role to play in this, because although the review found lots of really useful and interesting evidence, there is overall a need for more essentially rigorous evaluation of environmental education initiatives. And that's something that should be prioritised going forward in order to provide that really, really sort of robust evidence for policymakers. And there's definitely a need for more collaboration as well, between these different groups. So that's just a little bit of a whistle-stop tour. I think there's lots more detail which I could go into, but I'm just going to pass over to Bill now to finish off this.
Great, thank you again for this opportunity. Great to talk to you all. I did put a link in the chat with the with the link to the report on the NAEE website, so you can read more after this webinar session, Learning Lunch. We've got the question up, which is what you will take to the breakout rooms, but I just wanted to use this opportunity to kind of reflect back on this process and also think about it in the context of where we are in terms of the landscape of education in the UK and also this kind of moment in time in terms of potential education reform. And the other frame of reference I have for this is I also do a lot of work with NAEE, which is the North American Association for Environmental Education, which is based in the US but works across Canada and Mexico, possibly more in Canada these days, because they are really facing threats, political threats in terms of their work, in terms of funding the work, but also in terms of the language they use around environmental sustainability and climate education. So again, a counterfactual for us is that NAEE recently released a report on education for climate justice and climate action, and then they had to immediately unpublish it because there were concerns about their funding from the Environmental Protection Agency being cut off by the Trump administration as a result of that. So we are able to have this conversation in the UK. We're able to talk about these themes, but I imagine most of the people on this call also themselves feel like they have hit barriers in terms of what they are able to do, what they'd like to do in the classroom, in collaboration, in informal settings when it comes to environmental sustainability and climate education. And so this report was meant to kind of be another tool in the toolkit, another piece of evidence you can take, say, to the senior leadership team or to the governors to really advocate for what the work you would like to do. Um, but also it's worth noting that there's already a lot of great stuff out there. Again, many of the people on this call will have contributed to it in different ways. And even NAEE in 2022 released Young People's Learning and the Environment, a manifesto, which I think in many ways this report builds on, which is to say that all of these different stakeholders in the education system have a role to play. So again, the manifesto explored that it kind of as a collective, we agree to do these things. Whereas this report is a bit more of, we've synthesized the research, we're kind of building on best practice, good practice, now we're kind of passing it over to you in terms of the role you might play, again, as a governor or again, someone involved in policy making. And so I think, again, the reflection for me is, where do we go now? And I think this question that you have as to take us into the breakouts is very much a question of teacher educator practice. And how do you take this into your classroom? Whereas I think there is also a question of this moment of time in England in particular, in terms of the current government and the review that's happening of the curriculum, as well as broader review of the education system. What are our leverage points? How can we use this moment of opportunity? And something else the report kind of touches on are these tensions. There are tensions in this field as well. Do we think of climate sustainability and environmental education as a cross-cutting thing across different subjects and disciplines, or do we think of it as its own subject, again, with the natural history GCSE coming in being an example of what that might look like? In the UK context, there's the question of how we learn from what's happening in Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland, and both through the formal curriculum, but also in informal opportunities for learning, and also the teacher training and development that can happen in each place. So in some ways, there's more questions than answers that can come from a report like this, as well as it's worth noting that there's so many great resources out there, again, coming from the different partners that are supporting the Department for Education and the climate and sustainability work. There's the again, Justin's at UCL. I saw some other people in the chat saying they're from UCL. Again, the work that's coming out of there and their reports. And I think just again, a reflection from me is we don't want to kind of muddy the waters in terms of there being more resources, but what we want to do is to basically give people all of the again, the tools in their toolkit they need to advance this, again, to do it in the classroom, to do it in their kind of whole school environment, and then maybe to be looking more broadly at kind of education policy and kind of education reform. So with that, I don't know if Isobel or Justin had any other thoughts on the process of putting this together and kind of the role we see it playing before we continue the conversation in the breakout rooms.
I just wanted to say on behalf of the association, thank you both very much for all the hard work you've put in. Probably a lot more than we paid for, but it's very much appreciated. And yes, it is meant to be used in a whole different ways to help people, maybe to get grants, for example, by providing evidence of impact. And I would like to just finally thank the people on our advisory panel of practitioners and academics who gave feedback throughout the process to give some quality assurance. Over to you, Kathy.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And really, really important to focus on those differences in location, on what we are able to do and what we're not able to do. I think Bill has posted the link to the report, so after this very short session you'll be able to look at that in a lot more detail. But George, if you've got the breakout rooms ready now, perhaps you could open those up, and we can start discussing this question of how can we implement, how can we work together to support effective practice in the classroom, given some of those ideas around experiential learning and cross-cutting approaches, and looking at sustainability and climate education in a holistic way. So when you get your links, please do join, and we apologise in advance. We will be ripping you out of your breakout rooms shortly, and Justin, Bill and Isobel will collect some of your thoughts from your discussions in there. Welcome back. I can see smiles and laughs as you've all probably been ripped out mid-sentence. I'm sorry, Kate. Sorry. So welcome back, and I hope you did manage to have some discussions and some conversations, and most importantly that there are some ideas to look into and to read that report later. Bill, I'm going to hand over to you to do a little bit of a mop-up. Would you?
I can at least reflect on the conversation we were having in room number 2, which was yeah, some interesting themes. And I think the main things are what are the barriers for this, and for the practitioners, again, it depends on the context, but for many practitioners it's the fact that there are pressures on being a teacher, and there's very limited space for any form of innovation or kind of any form of doing things differently. And so that becomes a really difficult thing to overcome for a kind of a wide swath of teachers. And then you've got the like ones who are so committed that they overcome those hurdles. Again, some of them might be on this call or work with the people on this call. So it's just recognizing those limitations and recognizing these two different communities of the very actively engaged versus the average teacher that's just in coping phase constantly, that we're trying to actually kind of ease into this world or support in to do this work. And then there's a reference to the rounder sense of purpose as another set of resources that are really useful in terms of also emphasizing the meaning associated with this for teacher. And someone mentioned that there's been some research on or work on teacher retention, and teachers who do have some sense of meaning associated with the work they do are likely to stay in the field of teaching. So that could be another way of framing this to kind of senior leadership teams, which is, if you want to retain great teachers, give them meaning through their work and support it however you can, which is rather than, again, the frustration a lot of people who are super committed to this but actually feel like they keep hitting a brick wall and then eventually leave teaching because they think they can make a bigger impact outside of the teaching profession. Those are a few ideas that came up. I think there might be some other one. Anyone feel free to jump in from group 2 if there's anything else.
Thanks, Bill. And I'll quickly just leap in there to say we're very lucky to have secured Paul Varr to come and talk to us about that RSOP framework. And I believe he's on the NAEE. Is he a trustee? Yeah. Okay. Anybody from any other room like to feedback what they were talking? Ellie, I think you're muted there.
Just quiet, I think. Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Fantastic. Just speaking for Group 5, thank you so much, Rich Hurst and Artie and Ruth, recognising, thank you very much, Rich, this sense of feeling a bit jaded going through cycle after cycle after cycle and trying to pick out the things that have worked. And what works is when there's resource behind it and when it's a whole school approach from Rich's perspective. Thank you for sharing that. But also what doesn't work in seeing those many iterations is when things are piecemeal and the connectedness isn't recognised. Artie also recognised a barrier in terms of not having an affiliation to an institution. And I was thinking there about some of our coalition members who are perhaps not affiliated with an institution in that way and maybe struggle to therefore have their voices heard. And from my perspective in teacher education, it's something that needs that very broad brush. It needs to be part of the initial teacher education core content framework. That's where we need it, right at the top. Thank you. Hopefully that's represented as Group 5. Please do chip in if I've missed anything.
Thanks, Ellie. Fantastic. Any other contributions from the other rooms? Anybody want to feed in?
I'm happy to speak for Group 4, I think we were, which was very nice with Mark, Kate, Sarah and Meryl. We had a very quick sort of introduce ourselves, but we were also discussing the main barriers, and we felt that obviously the policy environment is the main, in many ways can be described as the main barrier. And so the need to sort of work on that through sort of climate psychology approaches, and also that we were highlighting, I think it was Kate was saying, we're in this window of real sort of possible change in the fact that there's all these consultations going on, including the Ofsted consultation, which closes today, and also another consultation on MPQ qualifications. So in a way, it's kind of an exciting moment to get involved and try to influence policy change, and hopefully we'll see something coming from that. But yeah, anyone in my group can say if I have.
And I think I just echo all the comments have been made. The point is, it might feel like we're going round in circles, but then that's how wheels work, and you get there in the end if you keep on going.
Good point. Good point. Any other contributions? Any other rooms have anything to add?
Meryl, you said that there was an event tonight about should schools go plant-based?
Yeah, so the Ministry of Education often does little sessions for teachers and educators, and so tonight's is I think between 6 and 7. It's been advertised on socials, including LinkedIn and Blue Sky and the places. But I'll put a link in before we end, so you can register for it. But it's just a discussion, 4 or 5 different people talking about their experiences and their strategy and things. So yeah, lots to talk about, and a really good way for schools to actually take some real climate action.
Great, thanks for sharing that, Meryl. Brilliant.
Thank you. So just to pick up on something that Isobel was saying around climate psychology approaches, that's a perfect segue. Our next learning lunch, which is going to be on the 27th of May, we're inviting Steffi Bardenek, who is the wonderful director from the Centre for Climate Psychology. She's just recently written a book, Climate Psychology and Change, and she's going to be looking at some of those psychological elements around education and engaging young people, and how part of that can be the urgent need to respond to young people's feelings and emotions that are sometimes quite absent from the educational narrative, but also how those emotions can serve as drivers and motors, movers towards action and more agency on the behalf of young people. So please do feel free to come and join us on those. I'm aware that we're over time now, so I'm going to thank you all very, very much for coming, and thank our wonderful speakers, Isobel, Justin and Bill. Thank you so much for sharing, and please do follow up on that really important landscaper report there at your leisure. We'll put it out on our Shared World Learning Lunch page, so you'll be able to catch the links if you haven't done so already. So a huge thank you, and I hope you get to enjoy some of this lovely sunshine. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.